The sun rose slowly over the bustling streets of Koudougou, casting long golden fingers over the rust-colored rooftops. Markets were just coming alive. Motorbikes zipped between cars. The scent of frying beignets mingled with the dust. And down the main road, slicing through the city like a promise, came the presidential convoy. Sleek black jeeps flanked by motorcycles, slicing past waving crowds. But inside the lead vehicle, President Ibrahim Traoré was not waving back. He never just waved. His eyes, always searching, always scanning, drifted over the people as if reading something deeper beneath the surface of celebration. And then he saw him. A boy, no older than 8, standing alone in the junction, not cheering, not smiling, just watching. His clothes were torn, hanging from his small frame like a memory too big to carry. His feet were bare, caked with dust, and in his arms he cradled a pair of old, battered army boots, far too large for him, worn down to the leather threads. "Stop the car," Ibrahim said. The convoy screeched to a halt. Guards turned, confused. But before they could ask questions, the president had already opened the door and stepped into the heat and dust. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Cameras froze. No one knew what he was doing. He walked straight to the boy and knelt, eye level, no guards, no speeches. "What's your name, son?" The boy stared at the ground, at the boots. His lips barely moved. "Malik," he whispered. "These were my father's. He died in the East. He was a soldier." Ibrahim's throat tightened. "And your mother?" "She's sick. We haven't eaten since yesterday," Malik said, barely holding back his tears. "I tried to sell these boots, but nobody wants them." He hesitated, then looked up, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to sell them, but my little sister is hungry." Ibrahim reached out and took the boots, gently like a relic. They were full of holes, faded by war and time, but they had marched across battlefields. They had carried a man who had once stood between danger and this very country. "Your father was a hero," he said softly, "and I promise you, you will never have to sell his boots again." The boy blinked. "Who are you?" The president looked down at the worn leather, then back into the child's eyes. "I'm someone who owes your father a great debt." Then he stood. "Find this boy's mother," he ordered his team. "Today, and every family in this area who lost someone in the army. I want names. I want stories. I want solutions." He turned back to Malik, scooped him up gently, and placed him inside the lead jeep beside him. And as the convoy resumed, slower this time, it wasn't just transporting a president anymore. It was carrying the weight of a broken promise, a silent vow that something would change. Somewhere in the hushed crowd, an old man whispered, "Maybe. This is the leader we were waiting for." That night, long after the streets had gone quiet and the cheers faded, President Traoré sat alone in his office. The boots Malik had left behind rested on his desk, worn and still dusty. But they weren't just boots. They were a father's final footsteps, a boy's silent cry, a symbol of a country's forgotten debts. He picked them up, turned them over in his hands like a fragile truth, then set them down and summoned an emergency session. The Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Social Welfare, the Office for Veterans Affairs. As officials filed in, their faces tense and confused, he remained still, calm. But when he finally spoke, his voice carried the gravity of history. "I met a boy today," he began, lifting the boots. "His father died fighting for this country. His mother is sick. They tried to sell these boots to survive." Silence. "These boots should be in a museum," he said, "not on the streets like forgotten garbage." He placed them down, carefully. Then with a sharp glance he asked, "Tell me, where did the money go?" An uncomfortable pause filled the room. One official finally cleared his throat. "Sir, according to our records, the family received full compensation after the soldier's death." The room held its breath. Traoré leaned forward, eyes hard. "Then explain to me why his son was barefoot and hungry." No one had an answer. President Ibrahim Traoré raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir," the young aide replied. "Then let's go see," he said, rising from his chair. The room fell quiet. Everyone had assumed the conversation would end with paperwork, maybe a phone call or two. But Ibrahim was already reaching for his coat. Not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. By midnight, the presidential convoy had veered off the paved roads of Ouagadougou and into the dim alleys of Koudougou. No press, no advance team. Just a leader driven by something deeper than duty. They arrived at a clay house, small and crumbling, tucked behind a half-collapsed fence. The roof had holes. The walls were stained with age. And inside, the darkness was heavy, not just from the lack of electricity, but from the kind of weight that sits on the chest and doesn't leave. Mariam, Malik's mother, lay on a thin mat, coughing. Her eyes fluttered open as the door creaked. Her body tried to sit up, but she was too weak. "I didn't expect you, sir," she whispered. "You shouldn't have to," Ibrahim said gently, kneeling beside her. "I came because something is wrong." He looked around. A tiny girl, barely 5, was curled beside an empty pot. Her arms wrapped tightly around her belly, too tired to cry. Ibrahim turned back to Mariam. "Did you receive any support from the army when your husband died?" She shook her head slowly, as if even the truth took energy she didn't have. "They said money was coming, but it never came." That was all he needed. By dawn, an emergency investigation was underway. Within 48 hours, the truth emerged like rot beneath the floorboards. The funds had been approved. The money was there. But a corrupt officer, trusted, decorated, had diverted the payments into a phantom account. Forged signatures, bribes, stolen futures. And not just for Malik's family. Over 100 others had been robbed in silence. For 2 years, no one noticed. Or worse, no one wanted to. President Traoré didn't hide from it. He went on national television that evening, not with a rehearsed speech, but with fire behind his eyes and Malik's boots on the desk in front of him. "I cannot stand before you and pretend everything is fine," he said. "We lost brave men to war, and then betrayed their families in peace." He held up the boots, not as a symbol, but as evidence. "These are not props. They are proof. I have ordered the arrest of those responsible. They will face justice, not because it's political, but because it's personal. We failed." Within the week, several high-ranking officers were fired. Some were arrested. A new policy was signed into law. No more middlemen. No more paper trails that ended in silence. Every support payment would now go directly to families through a secure digital system, traceable and transparent. He made every department head sign a declaration: "I take full responsibility for what happens under my watch. I will know every name, every number, every family we serve." And then he turned to the people. "We are not just changing policies," he said. "We are changing hearts." Back in Koudougou, Malik's life began to change, quietly but powerfully. New clothes, his first hot meals, and a brand new pair of polished black shoes. Not to replace his father's boots, but to walk forward in them. The old boots were placed beside President Ibrahim's desk, not as decoration, but as a daily reminder. During long cabinet meetings, when advisors spoke of progress, he would glance at the holes in that leather and ask himself, progress for who? Mariam, once on the edge of death, was airlifted to a proper hospital in Ouagadougou. No dirty hallways, no understaffed wards. She had clean sheets, competent doctors, and care funded fully by the government. Malik and his sister Aisha were enrolled in a new school, one built under a new initiative called Children of Heroes. A program launched days after that midnight visit. Each morning, Malik walked in a crisp uniform. Each night, he cleaned his father's boots, carefully, reverently, and set them beside his bed. "I'll wear them when I'm big enough," he told his teacher one day, "not to fight, but to serve." Back at the palace, President Ibrahim opened his doors to a new kind of guest: young widows, orphan children, forgotten voices. One day, a 10-year-old girl stood before the ministers. She looked no taller than the microphone. "Why did my father die for this country?" she asked, her voice shaking but clear. "If you forgot us the day after his funeral?" Silence filled the room like a slap. Ibrahim stood beside her. "That's a question we must answer," he said, "and if you cannot, then you have no place in this government." The movement spread like rain on dry soil. A national memorial fund was launched, not controlled by bureaucrats, but by a board of widows and soldier families. Mobile teams were dispatched to remote areas to locate forgotten dependents and deliver assistance directly. Ibrahim himself began unannounced visits, not photo ops, but real moments. He brought school materials, food, medicine. He listened. And his message was consistent. You cannot govern a people you refuse to see. At a town hall in a farming village, an elder stood up and asked, "Why are you doing all this now?" Ibrahim paused, then answered, "Because one boy stood in the dust, holding his father's boots, and reminded me that leadership is not about power, it's about people." They called it the March of the Boots, not a campaign, not a charity, but a movement of memory, of justice, of finally being seen. Because it was never just about Malik, it was about thousands of silent homes, about footsteps that had stopped being heard, and a leader who chose to walk into the dust and stay.